In this video, I'm going to be talking about different emotion theories, specifically the two historic emotion theories your book talks about. But first, you need to know what an emotion is. An emotion is a response of the whole organism involving three things. It involves a bodily arousal. It involves expressive behaviors. And it involves conscious experience. So I'm going to use the example of walking through the woods and seeing a bear. And so the emotion you would probably experience if you see a bear chilling right in front of you in the woods is fear. So the stimulus is the bear, the emotion is the fear, and the bodily arousal would be things like your heart rate increasing, breathing heavier, physically what's going on. Expressive behavior, which we'll talk about more in class, not so much with these historic perspectives because they don't really go into it as much, would be things like running away, making a scared face, all that fun stuff. So there are two historical theories that your book talks about. One is the James Lange theory, and so we'll talk about that, and the other is the Cannon-Bard theory. But first, if you saw a bear in the woods, what order would they be in? Again, we're going to be focusing on the stimulus, the physical arousal, and the emotion. Are you afraid because your heart is racing, or is your heart racing because you're afraid? Most people would say, oh, my heart's racing because I'm afraid. They would put the emotion before the bodily arousal. So that is sort of the common sense theory. Turns out, after actually doing some research, not the way it works. But that tends to be a common sense way to think about it. James Lange switches that order. James Lange theory and James and Lange are two separate people. James Lange theory says that you have your stimulus, which leads to arousal, which leads to emotion. So in this example, you see the bear, your heart races, and you feel afraid. So it's arousal leads to emotion. The easiest way for me to remember that James Lange has this order is that the arousal, A, comes before E, emotion, and in James and Lange, it's both that way. The A comes before the E, so arousal has to come before emotion. So you're afraid because your heart is racing, is what the James Lange theory says. And so we'll talk about that for right now. But actually, one more thing. If you're going to talk about this in more biological, physiological terms, it is your nervous system that tells you what emotion to have. So it's your nervous system, that peripheral nervous system, that is telling you what the emotion is going to be. Keep that in mind. Cannon-Bard, it refuses to choose between the two. So in the Cannon-Bard perspective, it says you have the stimulus, you see that bear, and it leads to arousal and emotion simultaneously. It won't choose one or the other. So if you see the bear, your heart races and you're afraid. Same time. Not going to choose. So again, this one, arousal leads to emotion. This one, arousal and emotion go together. If you want to talk about specific definitions, the James Lange theory is the theory that our experience of emotion is our awareness of our physiological responses to emotion arousing stimuli. So your experience of emotion, you thinking this is what I am feeling right now, is because of the arousal, the physiological response. The Cannon-Bard, the official definition from your book, is that an emotion arousing stimulus simultaneously triggers the physiological responses and the subjective experience of emotion. So again, you're not choosing one before the other. They're coming at the same time. So these are both historic emotion theories. We'll talk in class about how your spinal cord proves that neither of these can be the exact one. And then we'll talk in class about how you have to add some sort of cognitive component to both of these, or to emotion. So both of these don't do that. These cannot be accurate. But those were both the old school perspectives, the historic emotion theories.